Those of you who know me know that when I was a boy, I spent weekends and summers on my grandparents' farm. It was the life every boy dreams of. Cows and mules, ponies and cats, dogs and chickens and ducks. My grandparents lived in a big old farmhouse with a tin roof that came alive when it rained. Some of you have that same kind of memory. On Saturdays, my grandfather and I would go to the sale barn, come home and watch a little country music, and after supper I'd take a bath and get cleaned up for church on Sunday. My grandparents had one of those old-timey bathtubs. By that I mean big and deep. Getting in wasn't a problem, but getting out was. I'd get down in that thing and get some water going, and before I had much water in it at all, my grandmother would start knocking on the door and yelling at me to cut the water off. You're going to cause the well to run dry. With the door locked, it didn't matter much what she said. I kept that water going until I could float a battleship. And as far as I know, the well never did run dry. Not so for the creek running through the farm. It ran fine most of the year. I spent a lot of time playing in it. When it was running good, it sung a little song. Toward the end of summer, the creek dried up and the singing stopped. The dry creek meant that summer was about over and it was time for me to go home. I'll be talking about the dry creek today. The dry creek is a parable for our lives in a lot of ways. By it, I'm talking about those testing times when things don't go the way we'd hope. You know the kind of times I'm talking about. Those times when life takes a turn we weren't ready for. The dry creek in our lives might be a relationship that fell apart, or a dream that crashed and burned, or success that morphed into failure, or good health that gave way to disease. We all know the parable of the dry creek. It's a parable for our own lives in a lot of ways. When the creek runs dry, we all end up asking the same question. We ask, why me? But that misses the point. The focus shouldn't be on why or me. Instead, we should ask, why is this happening to me? The focus should be on this. Why is this happening to me, Lord? Lord, help me to understand it. The good news is we're not the first people to ask the question. Our text today comes from 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 1 through 7. In verse 1, we meet Elijah for the very first time. He just shows up. We don't know who his parents were, but we do know that they named him right. Elijah means, my God is Yahweh. Elijah's from Tishbe up in the hills of Gilead. And being from the hills, I'm guessing he spoke Hebrew with a twang. It's not the kind of place you'd expect the Bible's greatest prophet to come from. But it didn't matter where he was from, the Lord had a place for him to go. I want you to note that. It didn't matter where he was from, the Lord had a place for him to go. In verse 1, he gets his first assignment. God tells his new prophet from a holler up in Gilead to go and tell King Ahab, the king who set the standard for evil, that until I give the word, there won't be any dew or rain for the next few years. He went and told Ahab. In verse 2, the Lord told Elijah to leave here, turn eastward, and hide out in the Kerith ravine. Drink from the creek, and the ravens will supply you with food. Now some of you right now you're saying, Pastor, in my Bible it says brook, not creek. Well, where I'm from, I don't know what a brook is. Where I'm from, it's a creek. So in my translation, it says creek. Now Elijah went like he was told. Things are going pretty good, but over time the brook stopped running so strong. In verse 7, we're told that the creek finally dried up completely. As he stood there, I bet Elijah's thinking to himself, why is this happening to me? That's the question we should be asking when things go from good to extremely bad in our own lives. Not why me, but why is this happening to me? Lord, help me to make sense of it all. He's thinking too, Lord, what's it all about? I've gone where you said what you wanted, been thinking right, living right, and doing right. So why is this happening to me? Why did the creek run dry? Some of you have been there and you've thought that. Why did the creek run dry? No rain, Scripture says so. But I think the dry creek was also a way of preparing Elijah for the tough times coming. He was being prepared so that his trust in God would be running high when the next challenge came. The dry creek was part of Elijah's season of preparation. Elijah had to sit by the dry creek and experience God and grow his faith before he could do his best work for God. You see, the dry creek is training for the next challenge. You and I will never do our best work for God until we master the lesson of the dry creek. When things go against you, when you're put to the test, when you're under stress, when you don't know how things will turn out, it's a lesson you need to have learned. The next time your creek runs dry, the next time you find yourself asking, why is this happening to me? During those times when life takes you on a road trip you weren't ready for, when hard times come that make no sense, remember that Christ himself learned through the things that he suffered. Scripture says so in Hebrews chapter 5. When your creek dries up and hard times come, ask yourself what God is preparing you for, because the dry creek is training for the next challenge. Some folks fail to see it. They miss out on a chance to grow. Truth be told, the dry creek is training for the next challenge. It's a class you can't afford to skip. Now, as I close, let me ask, imagine how life would change if we all learned the lesson of the dry creek. How life might be if we asked, why this when the creek runs dry, instead of asking, why me? Imagine how life might change if we viewed today's challenge as preparation for tomorrow's challenge. Imagine how life might change if we lived knowing the dry creek is a training ground for the next challenge. What would happen if we saw every dry creek as an opportunity to grow our faith and our trust in God? Imagine that. Imagine how life would change for you and for me and the church if we began thinking that way. Amen.